What's up, guys? It's John, and let's talk Super Bowl for a minute because we've obviously covered this in depth. But as I said, there's going to be stuff coming out up until the Super Bowl that I think is just related. I think it's all a work. So, Patrick Mahomes' dad got arrested, and you know what? I bet you if it was Brock Purdy's dad, he wouldn't have got arrested. And obviously, that's not where my line of thinking goes, but I am wondering if this is where they might be heading with this. I had a lot of people bring up to me the prospect of it's a political year. They love racism. They love trying to push any kind of story that way. And I do wonder if they're going to try and push this as here's a nice father who is just having a couple beers before the game. I think he goes into it basically just celebrating the Super Bowl a little bit early. And he went and got arrested. And they even go and say how basically it wasn't because of the way he was driving, but they just noticed he had an expired tag, and they made the discretion to arrest Patrick Mahomes' dad. Now, again, I could be completely off. Maybe that's not where they're heading with this, but they've done a lot of things, in my opinion, especially over the years, to drive the race angle, even subliminally. So people looking at this are going to look at Mahomes, look at his dad, and just be like, "This is messed up. He's a class act." Again, I bet if it was Brock Purdy's dad, he wouldn't have been arrested, or something to that extent. I could be wrong. And as far as the arrest itself, I could say, I think this means they're going to win, lose. What I will say is this is one of the reasons that I like the Niners. Obviously, we've liked the Niners for a long time now. We've liked them to win last year. Basically, the same story, I think, this year makes sense for the Niners, just with Brock Purdy. Now, the reason I say it's one of the reasons I like the Niners is because there's something I'm noticing with the Chiefs, and I went into this when they were doing all the Taylor Swift nonsense. It's almost just like the Chiefs are just celebrating early here. You see the dad bod pictures. They're all just joking around, laughing, having a jolly old time. You have Kelsey doing keggers in the stands for his brother, and you got Swift and Mahomes, Brittany Mahomes besties. Obviously, we have the political tie-ins with Jackson Mahomes, all these different things. Makes me. I just thought of that. Then we just have Jackson play Mahomes, maybe a little bit of a prelude that we missed. But anyway, and then on the other end, you have a very serious San Francisco team who has not won in a very long time. Who I don't think they're. If we saw pictures, I don't feel like seeing this guy in his boxers. I don't think they're going to be showing the Niners in this regard. Again, the stuff I've seen from the Niners has more been like what you see from Super Bowl teams of old, or just championship teams of old, teams that really go out of their way to invoke, as the Lions had, the grit. Now, of course, not every team's going to win with that, but as far as there's one team who's just ready, and it just seems like this year the Niners are ready. The Chiefs, it just seems almost like they're celebrating early. And it almost seems like the fans are celebrating early and the NFL is celebrating early. Almost like they know what's going to happen. And it's one of the reasons I like the Niners in this matchup. You got Mahomes versus the world, and I think he's going to do very well. But I think they're going to, again, prove why you need a cohesive, unified, non-distracted, hungry team to win the Super Bowl. So, again, we've already liked the Niners, but with this new information, I like them even more. With the Mahomes dad, I'm wondering again where they go with it. Again, I think they're just going to say, you can't win a Super Bowl when you have all these outside distractions. And they might even try and tie in, they always talk about the culture. The culture of Kansas City with, again, you see the way they are acting with Swift and everybody else. They're just looking like they're at a fraternity, sorority rave. I could see them definitely pushing that same angle with Patrick here. Honestly, it looks like he had a couple joints. Maybe a couple beers, but looks like more like he was just enjoying some cannabis in this picture. But either way, I'm curious what they do with it. Like, it even says allegedly and on suspicion. It doesn't even really confirm that he was drunk driving or driving under the influence or while intoxicated. So I'm curious what comes out of this. I'm sure it's going to be a talking point. I could be wrong, and I'm kind of a day late here, so maybe I'm complete late to the news. But I bet you if I went to the cesspool of Twitter, I can find a lot of people saying, free Patrick Mahomes Sr. This is ridiculous. This wouldn't happen to a guy that was white, all these different things. And again, like there's times someone like first time watching my video, I remember when I did a Coco golf video and explained why she was obviously going to win because they're pushing her as the next Serena, and people are like, oh yeah, just a few people, but it was, again, if you hadn't seen the channel, you might not know that I just go into scripted sports and all these different works. Like, oh yeah, it has to be about race, doesn't it? And it's like, listen, I'm seeing these things that they force down our throats every day. So they make it about race. I just cover what I see. So I'm curious if they go that angle with this. I don't see it accomplishing too much, to be honest. Like, again, it's a story. It'll definitely give them, in my opinion, something to talk about as far as going into the Super Bowl. But I don't think it matters. Like, again, if it plays into the Super Bowl, if they're going to use it as an angle, it is smart because, again, it's a political year, and then you have like this underdog Purdy, but he's also privileged. He's also pushed as like this white privileged guy. And then on the other hand, you can't push Mahomes as like a poor guy or anything. Everyone knows about his upbringing, but it's like a Kaepernick situation. If you have a white guy versus a black guy, they're going to play that angle all day. So I wonder. I hope not. I think people have had enough of the political correctness and the social divide, but it's a political year, so it definitely makes sense. And that was kind of why I thought Lamar, at the beginning of the year, Lamar Purdy kind of made some sense because it's just like two polar opposites. But I find this all timing to be very interesting. They had just interviewed Mahomes like 3 days ago about Patrick's dad bod, and he said something to the effect of like it's in his DNA or something. And that's what I believe. I think these people are born into these bloodlines, so it's in his DNA that he was going to be chosen, not that he's some super athlete. And again, I know you don't have to look like Hercules to be athletic, but when you look at this picture and then you see what this guy does to defenses, it kind of makes you question it. And then you think about Brady doing it, like when he was like 10 years. Now, Brady didn't scramble a lot, but to even be out there and not be getting pummeled, at the age of 40-something is just insane. But I think, again, I think this doesn't do anything for the Chiefs argument. Again, I just think it's more evidence that they are just being pitched as a party team who's having fun. They've won already. Literally they've won already. But they've also, in my opinion, are pretending like they've won this one already. You don't see them out there really saying, we got to take this Niners team seriously. Brock Purdy is one of the best quarterbacks, even if they're saying it to gaslight. We're not seeing any of that stuff. So, again, still like the Niners, not much change. I just thought I'd go into some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes me like them even more. Again, you could just kind of see the Chiefs kind of getting some of a penance. With the father being arrested. You have some other things happening. And then at the same time, they're just kind of looking happy, but in a different way than a team that I feel like when we see like, oh, this team's going to win, and you can tell because they come out because they look happy and this other team looks disheveled. I think they fake people out nowadays, but it just seems more subliminal to me that, again, the Chiefs are just being pitched as this carefree organization who's just going to go have fun and win because they're the Chiefs. So, again, I think more money is going to be on the Chiefs no matter what. I went into that. They got people fading the Chiefs. They did such a phenomenal job for like the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks really, just, after they finished the season, having them look like, oh, they're going to get outed. And then mostly because of Mahomes, but just in general, they come out and they've won pretty convincingly outside of the Bills game, where they really outperformed the Bills anyway. There wasn't much, I think, as far as, I don't think they were trailing. I think they trailed by a touchdown for a minute, and that was about it. And then obviously they did a good job on the Ravens, which again is interesting with Jackson Mahomes. But yeah, I think another interesting, and it's not one I went into because the people are wondering who's the real Brady. And obviously Mahomes is the next Brady. But again, just like wrestling, there's never a next Steve Austin. There's never a next Hogan. There's never a next Rock. And if you see what's going on with The Rock lately, it's pretty ironic if you follow wrestling. But yeah, The Rock's going through it. But, Mahomes is his own guy. But they're going to try and pitch these different guys. Now they're saying, is Brock the next Eli? They haven't even, he hasn't even been to a Super Bowl yet. This is the first time. So they're really stretching with these comparisons. But one of the reasons I think Brock makes sense that I haven't seen mentioned, obviously I went into Mr. Irrelevant to Super Bowl MVP would be a ridiculous story. And for Mr. Irrelevant to beat a two-time Super Bowl champ, 2-time MVP, the best quarterback in the league, is such a great story, and it seems like that's where they want people to go. Again, Kansas City's having fun. Mr. Irrelevant's proven himself to be relevant. But what's also interesting is it'll mean Patrick Mahomes' 2 Super Bowl losses will be to a 6th and 7th round pick. And I could see them running with that statistic all day. I don't know if there's another quarterback, I'm sure there is, but that has lost to 2 such late draft picks. So if you add up their respective picks, like 262 and what would Brady be, like 180 something, whatever the heck he was, like the 400 something. I don't know if a quarterback's lost to his only 2 Super Bowls to 2 picks that were well after day one, almost 2 7-rounders. So I find that to be interesting, and I could see them running with that statistic. How again he beat Hurts, and I don't know where Jimmy G was drafted. I don't think he was like an incredibly high pick. I could be wrong, but either way, I think you get my point. And the guys he's beaten have been MVPs for as far as in the playoffs. He's beat first overall picks. He's beat all these guys. So it is kind of like an Eli story if he loses to Brock either way, because then again it'll mean the 2 guys he lost to are just drafted way, way, way after him and way after most quarterbacks. So I find that story to be interesting. And yeah, I think it's just going to fixate on the cultures. You have the Niners culture, which is this hungry bunch of players that are not going to let anything stop them from winning this Super Bowl, in my opinion. They're also the best team on paper, which if they want to prove it's not scripted, I went into this. You have the best team on paper when then you're going to say, oh yeah, the first seed, they had the best record, they beat the hardest teams, and you're really going to say that it's scripted because they won. It wouldn't make any sense. Whereas the Chiefs, they got in very conveniently. The division did terrible. And then the teams they played, obviously, then they started suddenly playing amazing. And again, I think it's just in time to get the public on them at plus odds so they can lose to the Niners. So I could be wrong. It's nothing too earth-shattering. I just thought I'd go into this because it really, in my opinion, fits the exact narrative I've been going into about Swift being a distraction. And again, I'm not saying that's why the dad got arrested, but the whole thing is basically coming down to again, a team, a culture, all these people that are just having fun, not playing football. And again, as I know his dad's not a football player, but they're not focusing on the football aspect with the Chiefs. It's all about these off the field distractions, in my opinion. So sure, they could win, I guess, and then they could say, oh, even with all this stuff happening, Mahomes rose to the occasion. But again, that's the very reason people started tuning out and saying it's scripted. I'm not watching it anymore because of the fact that the Chiefs are being slammed down people's throat. So again, I get the argument that they want to keep the Swifties. I get it. I was talking to my sister yesterday. I hadn't talked to her in a bit. She's busy. She came in and we talk about once a month when she comes in town, like in person, obviously. We talk on the phone, but we got to talking about football and, just started talking. And she knows I think it's scripted. And very, very quickly she said, yeah, I don't even watch football, but, now when Nick, that's her boyfriend, has the game on, if it's the Chiefs, I watch just to see, what they do with Swift. She's fun to watch. She likes her, and there's a whole demographic of non-football fans that like Taylor Swift. So I 100% buy that people they're going to have Taylor Swift with the Chiefs, and of course they have to have them in the Super Bowl. But I bring it up again, they don't need to win. They're not, again, the people that are watching Taylor Swift aren't going to say, oh, they lost in the Super Bowl, that's it, I'm never watching again. That's just not the case. They're going to watch next year. And Taylor Swift, again, them losing the Super Bowl, people are saying it's like a bad look on Swift, and she wouldn't be a part of a story if the team didn't win the Super Bowl. To me, that's just nonsense. They get to the Super Bowl, you still have Swift there, and then it makes just that much more sense next season when she's back, if that's what they do, if they have her back next year. Them winning the Super Bowl or her leaving and then them just continuing on doesn't do anything. It does nothing, in my opinion. So it's just an argument I can't buy. Again, what I can buy is them really just positioning the two teams. One is somehow your underdog, but let's be honest, they're the favorites. There's a reason that everybody knows Mahomes is the best, and there's a reason that nobody's actually picking against the Chiefs now. All of these analysts are picking the Chiefs. They're all picking them because they have Mahomes, and the Niners have Brock, which again, Another weird commonality, because people were telling me about, well, Kelsey's Mr. Pfizer. He's never going to lose. It reminds me of the last election year that we had a Super Bowl. I seem to remember, and I could be wrong, but I seem to remember Tom Brady not wearing a mask, kind of catching some flack for that. I remember he was late to training camp that year because he didn't want to take the vaccine. And I remember watching the Super Bowl, and it was really comical because I watched Tom Brady go out there and effortlessly drive down the field, no mask, all, just like a normal person, because he's out there with all these other guys. What's the point of being at the bottom of a dog pile only to then put your mask on, right? But Brady does that, goes to the sideline. Then Mahomes comes out and he drives down the field, does whatever he does, and then runs onto the sideline, puts his mask on, and starts hyperventilating right into it like the world's dumbest fish. So it was really goofy to watch. I knew they were going to force it, but if you watch that Super Bowl back, if you're able to, I'm sure they'll show it because they want people to see it. Every time this man went to the sideline, he went and put his mask on and just sat there like, a good boy. And Tom Brady didn't. And Tom Brady won. So, again, I get that Kelsey's pushing Pfizer, but it is kind of weird because it was almost like, and that was the year Trump moved to Florida, said Brady was his best friend, all these different things. So, if there was going to be a guy that lost, it was going to be Brady that year, if it was going to be for political reasons. But it was the opposite. The guy that was kind of pushed as the anti-masker, the Trump guy, he actually won when the guy, that was made sure that every time he was on camera, we saw him wearing the mask. And it was ridiculous because he was actually, by the fourth quarter, the announcers were pointing out, they're like, this is odd. Patrick Mahomes, not looking like he usually does. And he's getting fatigued. And I'm like, yeah, it's because he's freaking hyperventilating into this mask every time he runs to the sideline. But I think it was all a show. Again, there's no reason for a guy, and whether you want to wear them or not, or that at the time you did, it doesn't make sense for a football player who just got, again, he's out there getting tackled, he's getting sweat on him, spit on him, all those different things, to then run on to the sideline when he's by himself and put it on. So, again, it's all virtue signaling, but it is an example, I think, of the last time we had this team and they were really pushing the masks. This time it's the vaccinations. They lost the last time, so I don't see why they would win this time. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah, I tried looking into all the different stories, Mr. Pfizer, and obviously it's a strong one. When you do what they want you to do, typically they're going to pay you off. But at the end of the day, I think both of these teams are going to get their payoff. They're all sellouts at the end of the day, and I think they really want to push the fact that, again, you don't have a team that's ready to play in the Super Bowl. You had a team that got to the Super Bowl, and they relied on the fact that they're the Chiefs and they have Mahomes to win. And I think this Niners team is just going to, from a team aspect, look 5,000 times better. Whether that's a close game, probably will still be a pretty close game. But I'm starting to lean more towards maybe, at least a touchdown victory by the Niners. I think they might beat them pretty bad. Of course, they want it to be a close game, but again, you make it an overtime field goal game in the Super Bowl, and the same people that said, again, a year ago, it's scripted for Mahomes to be the next Brady, these games are like a Marvel movie, they're going to be saying the same thing. So, I am curious as far as how what goes forward with the Patrick Mahomes Sr. news. Again, it doesn't seem like the guy was driving recklessly from, again, the reports. It just seems like he had a couple beers and they happened to catch his plate, and then they happened to see he had a beer and they used their discretion to arrest him. It leaves a lot open to interpretation where someone can easily say, that's ridiculous, this is definitely a race crime, it's a hate crime. So I'm wondering if that's where they go with this. And again, I think it's all staged. I really do. When they talk about these guys getting arrested or whatever may happen, I don't believe anything anymore. I'm sure there's records of it and such, but again, there's a lot of things that they can do. But I think even if it is real, it's a perfect narrative for them to run with. They've already been kind of subtly pushing, again, the urban quarterback versus the rural quarterback, and again, it's hard to push Mahomes as like a guy who's struggled or anything like that, so they don't do that. But they can still push Purdy as this privileged guy who's in this system and everything's working out for him, even though he's not paid very much. I think that's where they're going to wind up going with it, just to an extent. So we'll have to see. Again, they've never been shy to do race angles in the past, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people, just because of what the news has done over the last several years, just rooting for or against Mahomes for race only. I could see that 100%. And that's because of what they've created. They've done it with a lot of sports. So where you just watch a team or a guy and they have them rooting for the person because they're white or black or whatever the case may be. And I'd say especially when they had Brady, they really wanted to push that, especially because Brady never really came out politically. So he was just kind of lumped in as like a Trumper. So you had a much easier way of establishing, okay, this is the evil guy and this guy's the not evil guy. But with the Chiefs, I don't know. I'm not sure, again, exactly what they're going to do with his father being arrested. Sure, they could just say, like, pull a Brett Favre and be like, oh, look at him. It's much different, of course. But look at Patrick handling this composure and just bouncing back from all these different distractions. But I think the distractions are going to be what winds up cooking them. I really do. So, yeah, again, I mean, I hate to be redundant, but this has been since last year. I think the Niners make the most sense. I still think they do. And you throw in this extra white noise, and I think it's just more of a reason that they're going to give for the Chiefs not winning. They just weren't the Chiefs this year, and the fact that they got to the Super Bowl is a ridiculous overachievement because without Mahomes, they probably wouldn't have made the playoffs. And again, you have so many guys on the Niners who have paid their dues. I never bring up Kittle. I don't know why. I always bring up Fred Warner and Debo. And I think it's because Kittle's like one of those guys. He's very, very clever. He's like Kelsey. He'll completely no-show for so long, but then he'll like suddenly be amazing one game and top tight end. So he does a good job of hiding. But he's another guy that he was just in WrestleMania last year, got involved in the match, which his friend Pat McAfee wound up winning. Now you could say, oh, that means Pat's going to win. But again, you can go a million ways with that. But for me, the story was more Kittle was involved in WrestleMania, looking great, all smiles. Again, these guys are all actors. So when he gets his WWE championship, he's just going to go absolutely insane. And I think it makes the most sense that this would be the year you give it to him, you give it to Debo. Again, Mr. Irrelevant, unless they're just going to not run with him going forward, which I seriously doubt, you give Mr. Irrelevant, fine, like the one chance you have here, you give a Mr. Irrelevant a Super Bowl ring. So puts Mahomes at, last year we liked him once we knew the Super Bowl, we went with the Chiefs. Someone had asked me who did I go with last year, and they weren't my preseason pick. But when we had Chiefs-Eagles, I did go Chiefs. You can watch the video if you want. Mostly because I just thought it made more sense that year. I didn't think they were going to have Mahomes start his career off 1 out of 3. That made no sense to me. And that's why this one, he can afford this loss. But the 2 out of 3 made him .666, which is a very fitting number. And this year he could be 2 out of 4 in 24. So with all the 24s we're seeing, we saw it with Djokovic. He had the worst Australian Open of all time and stayed on 24. They zoomed in on his shoes every once in a while so we could see the 24. He's probably going to stay firmly planted there for a while. Actually, if you want a nice little futures bet, there's no way they don't run with this. I guarantee you in the French Open we're going to get Alcaraz versus Nadal. How do they not give us that? And again, when they have Nadal, even though he's, usually with the older guys, they come back. Like it happened with Andy Murray, even with Federer. They don't get great odds. So you take them thinking, I mean, they get good odds, but they don't get favorite odds. So people look at them, oh man, Andy Murray's getting like plus 2,000 here. He could win this. He won this event before. Oh, and it happened with Federer. Nadal's getting like favorite odds. I think he's like second or third favorite. It's like Alcaraz, Djokovic, Nadal, or I think it's Alcaraz, Nadal, Djokovic. But they're all getting plus odds. I think it's plus 180, then like plus 240. So if you pick that exact matchup, which of course they're going to do, Alcaraz versus childhood hero, a passing of the torch in Spain, and again, the passing of the torch from the greatest clay player of all time to possibly the next greatest clay player of all time. I'll go more into that because it's not for a few months. But nice and early, you can get some pretty good odds on those two to match up. And it keeps it where Djokovic doesn't just run away with the majors. Because he is, and that's why we had Alcaraz. That's why we got Sinner. We got some good calls. We had Medi winning when he won. Because I was just like, okay, it makes sense for Djokovic to win this one. That was the U.S. Open because of the story, and he did. But then it's like, okay, he's not going to finish with this many more majors than Nadal and Federer. So keeping that story alive where Nadal could tie Djokovic again, I think. They'd both be at 24. Since, of course, they like Nadal better than Djokovic. The powers that be, in my opinion. You could just tell by the treatment. And Federer's already established so well that again, them being a couple majors ahead of him doesn't change many people's minds. But getting Nadal tied with Djokovic, or again, leaving the story alive where he can go against Alcaraz to go for number 24, again, in the year 24, is a much better sell in my opinion. So just wanted to point that out because I saw the odds the other day and I thought, wow, this is pretty good future. Picking that exact matchup is going to get you like plus 400 at least. My book didn't have the exact matchup at the time, but I know for a fact, since both of them are around plus 200 or better, that it's not like one of them's at minus odds, then you wouldn't get something. But once they have exact matchups, it'll probably be around like plus 400, maybe even better, depending on your book. So I thought I'd bring that up while I thought of it. I found it interesting that, again, Nadal's returning just in time as the new Golden Boy's rising. And, of course, that would be a mega draw, seeing them two play on clay. I don't think they would have them two not be able to play each other on clay. And sure, it could be at another tournament, but I feel like you got to do it now. Otherwise, you're waiting a year, and I don't think it would be as believable for Nadal to win, a year later. So just wanted to bring that up while it was on my mind. But yeah, as far as this, again, loving the Niners. I think they win. I think they cover. And I think with all these distractions, it's the best way I can put it. It just seems to be a lot of outside noise in a league that you're trying to push as a real league, that the better football team wins, all these different things. I don't think you're going to have this team where everyone's just so focused on everything but football. I don't think to me, it's the perfect excuse for the Chiefs to lose. I really think that. And someone else brought up a good point, because people keep saying there's no way Mahomes starts out 2-4. And someone had commented on a more recent video I put out and said, LeBron didn't do too well overall in the championship, but started off the finals not so good. I think he started off 0-2, didn't he? Got swept by the Spurs, and then I thought he lost the first one with Miami. So I think he might have started 2-4 to be exact. So again, Mahomes doesn't have to follow exactly what Brady did and win the exact same percentage Brady won at. Making 4 Super Bowls, having 2 MVPs. Again, he will probably get a back-to-back in the next 5 years. I do think maybe a down year and then they do back-to-back or something like that. But I just don't think it's going to be now. I don't think it has to be now. And I've gone into that I've covered videos that have wrestling connections. I've covered videos just straightforward. I've gone into how they're trying to get everybody on the Chiefs, it seems like, and they've successfully done a great job trying to prove it's not scripted. Went into Pat McAfee and how last year he was pushing the exact same story. Oh, everyone thinks it's rigged for Mahomes. Now McAfee's trying to do the same thing, but with the logo theory. So, he's trying to say, with the logo theory, it proves it's not scripted. So, and then I think when Mahomes loses, that's exactly what's going to happen. They'll come out and joke, I think. Oh, what did Mahomes say? I want my dad to get arrested and I want to lose in the Super Bowl. Yep. Just like when guys get hurt and they joke. What's interesting is Jalen Ramsey was one of the guys at the table read for this, mocking the public NFL is scripted commercial. He was literally one of the guys who came out and admitted it was. He tweeted out, I think it was 2017. It was when he was back on the Jags, and he tweeted out, SMH, coach told us not to play too tight defensively and to let Tom Brady look good. They wanted the Chiefs to advance. This is what he put out in a tweet, which he had to later delete. So it's like even these guys that they have mocking the public, including Pat McAfee, have come out before and called it rigged. So they know they have a problem. Very similar to WWE here with The Rock. It's a different type of problem, but it's an audience that might be tuning out because the league is being so tone deaf. So I can go into The Rock. I'll probably go into him later because I already did a pretty long video on what I think is going to happen there. But as far as the tie-ins to now we got The Rock from California going up against the tribal chief, you can't make this stuff up. Again, it's just too ridiculous. You have to make it up. They always say you can't make it up, but it's actually the opposite. It's something that you absolutely have to make up. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about the arrest. If the news, I don't watch the news, so that's the reason I always just give my opinion, because I'm like, I could be dead off. Maybe they haven't mentioned it once, but I could see them running the race angle here. And again, basically, would this have happened if it was Brock Purdy's dad? Stuff like that. I really can just see them pushing that. But then afterwards, they haven't said a word about it all season, but I really believe after the Super Bowl, all we're going to hear about is distractions. and they're joking about the dad bod. Maybe he should have actually hit the gym. Actually, I saw a funny article where Pat Mahomes' dad was like, "Oh no, he has a dad bod, but he's the hardest worker I know. He's at the gym like every day. He works out 3 times a week." And I'm thinking like that's like the bare minimum. Like if someone works out, then they know like you go 4 or 5 days a week. You go twice rest day, maybe 3 times rest day. 3 times a week is like the bare minimum. So I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke or if he was being serious, but just everything seems to lead me down the path of what seems to be the most obvious from every angle. The better team that somehow has less of the public on them, with the more unified front that's hungrier, that doesn't have a million distractions, is going to win. And I think that's what they're going to cover afterwards. And again, it's a perfect way of saying, oh, if it was scripted, there's no way they would have let the Chiefs lose, yada, yada. And I think that's where we're going. So just wanted to give an update. I know someone asked me, like, when's your next Super Bowl video going to be? And, I'm like, well, gosh, there's one game. I want to cover it as much as possible, and we'll be going live for it and all that stuff. But I say this all the time. I never like to make videos just to make them. I only like to bring out new information if something drastically changes. And the only thing that's changed here is I'm going from thinking this might be a close game to the Chiefs showing up and not knowing what the hell hit them when they're down 14-0. And we might see a little comeback action. We might see something. Maybe the Chiefs are the ones who get out to a lead. But I think the Niners are going to get it together and beat them pretty decisively. So I'll have an exact score, of course. I was thinking at first 26-20, something like people wouldn't expect. I thought that would be a fitting number too, because Purdy's number is 262, draft pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like 30-17 or something like that. I don't think it's going to be a crazy shootout, but I think the Niners might decisively win this one. So, of course, again, I'll have more videos out as far as the Super Bowl is concerned and other videos in general, but might be one more Super Bowl video after this. There's just not much more I can go into. We basically went into it all on the playlist, but I do find this fits something that we've been talking about. Well, it fits two things, and I don't know if it's going to fit the race theory. Like I said, that depends how much ESPN, NFL, and all these other news outlets want to push it. They might not push it at all. It might just be for a completely different reason. But as far as the people being on the Chiefs, as far as these distractions, all these different aspects, just makes me more and more certain that we're going to get a Niners victory and Mr. Irrelevant holding the Lombardi Trophy. So take care and happy earnings.